The first thing we saw when we got there was this education area. And then right after that, we walked around to a lot of the little animals in the tropical area, and it just showed a bunch of information about all the animals, but not all of it was necessarily um, information pertinent to like survival or how many of these animals were in the wild. It was just kind of fun, fast facts next to the animals. At this point, all of the information was provided in like a first person account as though um, some kind of researcher was actually like explaining all this to us, or we're looking at like their journal or something like that. Similar to these like journaly things, there were also a bunch of screens that had a bunch of information about the different animals, and the screens usually had like conservation status and different things about the animals. And there was one that was like, be quiet, there's babies, and then they change every couple seconds, and there's probably like 5 slides per animal, just little information on the animal, fast facts, what they eat, what they don't eat, why they look the way that they do. And it was like super educational because it's simple to just sit there and read something that changes every 5 seconds, because it keeps you interested and the colors change and it has the picture of the animal and it's engaging and it has information about the zoo and stuff like that too. None of these screens really showed how much research goes into, knowing about the animals or whatever. It kind of just is supposed to be assumed that, the zoologists or the people working at the zoo just already kind of know. And a lot of it was just, tidbitty kind of things, even though it did have a lot about conservation and, well, just specifically for the animal, if they're, high or low on the conservation list, and just kind of like fun things about the animals. So it's informational in the fact that it tells you about them, but it doesn't tell you how to protect them. Another one of the indoor things were interactive things that you could do that were either electronically interactive, or you just look at what the animals use to interact with each other or whatever. So these ones were both electronic, and you can go inside this little igloo. When we were outside, all of these animals that we walked past that were allowed to be outside because they could stand the cold, or even the ones that weren't, that had permanent outdoor enclosures, had this information about all the animals. And on the bottom of each one of these squares was how endangered they were or where they were on the conservation scale, and it had information about what they eat and if they like to be outside and where they live and about their home countries and stuff like that. Again, though, none of these little informational squares said anything about research really. It was really just about the animals and whether or not they were endangered, or just information about them when they're babies or as they're growing up, or signs that say things like don't feed the animals, which is, informational for the people at the zoo. But past that, it was just kind of fun stuff. There were also a couple things about enrichment for the animals, which I thought was really interesting because I'd never heard of it until this class, and now I was actually seeing it at the zoo. Some of these things are just some more information about home countries and whatnot, and just different things about certain interesting animals. And then um, there were a couple things about like the biology of the animal, or like the skull of the animal, just to compare to something that a child would actually know, or to look at and be able to like compare a paw print to their own handprint. And then another little enrichment thing that I thought was really interesting, the balls they play with and whatever. Then there were these huge walls of information, which was really interesting because you could see it on a better scale because it's all of Africa being on one wall. And then there's some more enrichment things for the gorillas and what they eat. And then at the end, there were some conservation plaques about habitat, their conservation, the status of their conservation, and then the culture where they come from, the behaviors that the animals do, and the adaptation. These plaques were only for super well-known animals, though, like the lion, the Amur tiger, and the penguin. So I'm not sure that they do this for every single animal. All in all, I think the zoo provides enough interaction for the animals between themselves and the zookeepers, and the enrichment in their enclosures. The exhibits and habitats themselves seemed okay. I'm sure the bigger animals would love more room. There seems to be enrichment for most of the animals, which I thought was good and a good step towards having a good environment for them. And I think I was satisfied with the welfare as much as you can be with them being in a zoo, other than in their own world and happy out in the environment that they're from. I think there's an awesome amount of education information provided. I think they do a great job of trying to engage people with all of the exhibits and the things that you can compare your knowledge and the size of your hand and look at the skulls. And I think I learned a lot just by all of the engagement opportunities while walking around. Even though it wasn't super clear to me what types of conservation or research efforts the zoo was doing, it seems that they were actually doing some kind of conservation effort, even if it's, on the lower scale. Just the fact that they actually showed where on the scale that each animal was, I think, was a good part of it, because just for people to know whether or not an animal is endangered or in trouble or getting close or whatever, I think is a good step. And then there's a really cool interactive thing near the polar bears that was like how you can help in your own way to, try to combat climate change or whatever. So I thought it was a really good, like, informational amount of conservation stuff too.